She thought her children deserved someone better until he refused to let her break. Clara had always believed she was doing what was best for her children. In the quiet moments, when the wind whipped against the metal walls of their small settlement and the stars blinked coldly overhead, she would sit on the rough bench outside their home and wonder if she was enough. She wondered if she could give them the life they deserved, the life of safety, warmth, and opportunity. Sometimes, the thought came as a bitter ache. Maybe someone else could give them that life better than she ever could, her children. Lyra and Cale were laughing nearby, chasing each other in the dust-strewn yard of their home. They were small and scrappy, with bright eyes that reflected the fierce curiosity of youth. Alara watched them, her chest tightening. Every laugh, every yell of delight, was a reminder of why she pushed herself so hard. But it also reminded her of her own limits. She had survived the harsh years after the climate collapse, after the cities fell into ruin, after the world seemed to shrink around the survivors. But surviving was not the same as thriving, and that truth gnawed at her. The settlement they lived in was not much. It was built from the remnants of old buildings, twisted metal, and scavenged panels of solar cells. Water had to be filtered from nearby wells, food had to be rationed carefully, and electricity was a constant worry. But it was home. And Alara had built it with her own hands, shaping it into a place where her children could feel, even briefly, that the world was safe. Yet safety had its limits. A convoy had arrived a few days earlier, carrying messages from a distant settlement said to be untouched by the worst of the disasters. They offered security, education, and a structured life. It was everything Alara wanted for her children, but she could not bring herself to leave so easily. Not yet. She did not trust promises. The world had taught her that lessons were learned through loss, not hope. Still, as she prepared the modest breakfast of dried grain and filtered water, the temptation whispered in her mind. She could see it in her children's eyes too, in the way they paused sometimes when they spoke of the convoy. They did not know the danger of change, but they knew the allure of something better. Alara shook her head, dismissing the thought. They would not leave today. She had made that choice long ago. Today, they would survive. Today, she would protect them. She stepped outside with their small satchel of supplies, scanning the settlement for any signs of trouble. The wind carried a familiar chill, stirring the dust around her boots. It was early, but the day was already alive with activity. Other families were preparing for work, scavenging, or repairing structures. The air smelled faintly of smoke and dust. But there was also a sense of quiet determination that she had always admired in humans. Even in the ruins, people found a way to keep going. Mother. Lyra's voice called out. Cale says we can reach the old tower if we climb that wall. Alara looked where her daughter pointed. The wall was tall and jagged, part of the remnants of a collapsed factory that had become a landmark in the settlement. Cale had already begun scaling the lower portion, his small hands gripping the crumbling concrete. Don't go too far, Alara called, her voice firm but gentle. Stay where I can see you. Her children were fearless, a trait she both admired and feared. She remembered a similar fear she had felt in her own youth, exploring abandoned ruins with reckless curiosity. It had been thrilling then, but survival now required caution. One wrong step could mean injury or worse. As the children climbed, Lyra's attention shifted to a figure moving along the edge of the settlement. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a steady stride that suggested confidence and experience. Joran. She had seen him before, moving silently, almost like he was part of the wind. He had a reputation for being helpful, but distant. Someone who could fix almost anything but rarely lingered in conversation. Today, though, his presence felt different. He approached with a purposeful calm, carrying a small toolkit in one hand. His eyes met hers briefly, and there was a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding of the struggle it took just to exist here. You're up early, Alara said. Not hiding the cautious edge in her voice, Joran nodded. Thought I'd check on the water filters. Heard there might be a leak near your well. Alara raised an eyebrow. She appreciated his diligence, though she disliked the implication that her responsibilities were being questioned. They're holding for now. But thank you. He did not respond with words, only a slight tilt of the head. That was Joran, quiet, observant, reliable. The children's shouts grew louder as they reached the top of the wall. Lyra waved triumphantly, and Cale followed with a grin that lit up his entire face. Ilara allowed herself a small smile, despite the knot in her stomach. Her children were brave. They were clever. They deserved a world that recognized those traits, not just survival, but growth, opportunity, and safety. Joren moved closer, crouching slightly to inspect the edge of the well. It's not leaking, but the filter is clogged with debris. I can fix it in a few minutes. Ilara stepped forward, her hands resting on her hips. We don't have much time. I need it done before midday. He worked quietly, efficiently, and without complaint. Ilara watched him, a mix of appreciation and unease rising in her chest. She did not trust easily, and Joren's presence stirred feelings she had long suppressed. Trust was dangerous in a world like this, but she could not deny that humans were meant to help each other. Even in the harshest conditions, the morning passed in a rhythm of small tasks, broken only by the occasional laughter of the children or the call of someone signaling danger or discovery. By midday, the filters were working again, and the water was flowing clear and cool. Joren wiped his hands on his trousers and looked up at her. Better? He asked simply. Ilara nodded, unable to form the words she wanted. It was better. That was all that mattered. As the sun climbed higher, the settlement grew busier. The children explored nearby ruins, and Ilara began organizing supplies for the next few days. She felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. There was so much to do, and yet she felt a strange sense of relief. Despite the danger, the dust, and the scarcity, there was life here. There was hope. Joren stayed nearby, observing, assisting when necessary, and leaving when his work was done. His quiet support was a comfort she did not fully understand. It was not love, not yet, but it was enough to remind her that humans were not meant to face challenges alone. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and red, Ilara gathered her children near the small fire she had built. Lyra and Cale sat close, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. They were tired from the day's adventures, but their eyes shone with excitement. Tomorrow, Ilara began softly, we will check the eastern ruins for supplies. We might find food, tools, or something useful for the settlement. Cale frowned slightly. Do you think the convoy will come back? Ilara's heart skipped. She had hoped to avoid the question, but it had come anyway. She looked at her son, then at her daughter, and sighed. Maybe they will, but we cannot count on them. We have what we have here, and we make it work. That's how we survive. Lyra leaned against her mother, and Cale sat close. For a moment, the three of them were just together, bound by shared struggle and shared hope. Ilara realized that this was resilience. This determination was what made humans extraordinary. Even in the harshest world, they survived, they adapted. They thrived. As night fell, Ilara stood at the edge of the settlement, looking out at the distant horizon. The stars were bright tonight, more so than she had seen in years. She thought about the convoy, about the promise of a better life for her children, about the choices she would have to make. But for now, there was no choice to be made. For now, she would watch over her children, protect them, and teach them the strength that humans carried within themselves. She would show them that even in a world that seemed broken, there was beauty, courage, and ingenuity. That even when the world pushed you to the edge, humans could endure, could fight, and could rise above. And as she watched Lyra and Cale sleeping peacefully, she felt for the first time in a long while that maybe they were already getting that life, the life she had promised herself they would have. Not through wealth or safety, but through strength, love, and perseverance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, and perhaps new choices. But tonight the world was quiet, and for now, that was enough. The next morning began with the sharp call of the wind across the settlement. Ilara rose before the sun, as she always did, and prepared a small breakfast for Lyra and Cale. The fire's glow barely touched the edges of the rough walls, but it was enough to chase away the cold for a few minutes. The children, still sleepy, sat close to her, rubbing their eyes and trying to hold on to the warmth. "Are we really going to the eastern ruins today?" Cale asked, his voice low and cautious. Ilara nodded, stirring a thin porridge. "Yes, there might be tools or food we can bring back. And we need to check the walls for damage after last night's storm." Lyra's eyes brightened. "I want to climb again. Maybe I can reach the top faster this time." Lara smiled faintly, but shook her head. "Not today. Today, we need to be careful." She knew that part of growing up in this world meant learning courage, but also learning caution. Too much recklessness could cost them everything. By the time the sun began to rise fully, painting the ruins in soft gold, Ilara had gathered supplies for the journey. A few rations, water flasks, and basic tools. Joran arrived silently as usual, carrying a small pack that he had offered to share. "You sure you want to take the children?" he asked gently. "It's not dangerous now, but the ruins are unstable. One wrong step." Ilara's jaw tightened. "I'm sure. They need to see the world, learn how it works. And besides, they won't go if I don't lead." He nodded, clearly respecting her decision, and fell into step beside her as they walked toward the eastern ruins. The terrain was uneven, with crumbling streets and toppled buildings. Each step required attention as debris shifted underfoot. Yet, despite the danger, there was a strange beauty to the ruins. Sunlight reflected off shattered glass. The shadows of fallen structures created patterns across the dusty streets. Cale darted forward, examining a pile of broken concrete. "Look, maybe we can use this to patch the walls." Ilara approached, kneeling beside him. "Good, but stay close, all right?" She placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the small but firm strength of his body. He was growing fast, learning quickly, and she worried that she could not always keep him safe. As they moved deeper into the ruins, they began to hear a faint noise, a scraping sound, distant but growing steadily. Ilara's senses sharpened immediately. She motioned for the children to stay close and slowed her steps. Joran, noticing the change, adjusted his pace as well, scanning the area with quiet precision. "Probably just debris," he muttered. Though his tone lacked certainty, the scraping grew louder, turning into a low rumble that shook the ground beneath their feet. Ilara's heart raced. Instinct told her to retreat, but another part of her urged calm. Fear was a tool, not a master. She had to think, to act, and to protect. Suddenly, a section of wall collapsed ahead, sending clouds of dust into the air. Lyra shrieked, and Cale stumbled back. Ilara moved instinctively, grabbing them both and pulling them away from the falling debris. Joran was at her side in an instant, steadying her and scanning the crumbling structure. "It's safe for now," he said quietly, though his eyes never left the ruins. "But we need to move carefully. These buildings won't hold for long." Ilara nodded, leading her children along a safer path through the ruins. Every step was calculated, every move deliberate. She felt the familiar surge of pride mixed with fear. Her children trusted her, and she could not fail them. They reached a partially intact building, its walls still standing but its roof cracked and unstable. Inside, the floor was littered with broken furniture and scattered papers. It smelled of dust and decay, yet also of life once lived. Ilara instructed her children to stay close as she and Joran searched for anything useful. Cale's eyes lit up as he found a small toolbox, nearly intact. "Mother, look. Tools." Ilara smiled, taking the box carefully. "Good find. This will help repair the walls back home." Lyra ran her fingers over a stack of old notebooks. "Maybe there's something we can use for lessons," she said softly, her voice tinged with awe. Even in the ruins, human curiosity thrived. Even in destruction, there was knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. For a moment, the tension lifted. They worked together, salvaging what they could, their hands moving quickly but carefully. Joran watched them, occasionally pointing out safer paths or better ways to carry heavy objects. His quiet presence was steadying, like a shadow that followed without intruding. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, beating down on the ruined city. Sweat ran down Ilara's back, but she did not pause. She knew the importance of efficiency. Every minute spent here could mean the difference between success and danger as they prepared to leave. A distant roar echoed through the ruins. Alara froze, her instinct screaming. She motioned for her children to stay low, and Joran crouched beside her. The sound was not ordinary. It had a mechanical rhythm, deliberate and heavy. Machines, Joran whispered. Or someone else moving equipment nearby. Alara's mind raced. She weighed options carefully, knowing that hesitation could be fatal. They could run back immediately, but that might expose them to unstable structures. They could hide, but that might delay them long enough for danger to find them. Stay close, she instructed, gripping their hands firmly. We move together, and we do not panic. They moved slowly, carefully, down a narrow passage between buildings. Dust rose in small clouds around their feet, and the roar grew louder. Lyra stumbled, and Alara caught her instantly. Kale's hand was warm in hers, steadying her own nerves. Then they saw it. A large vehicle, patched together from old parts, was rolling through the ruins. Its wheels ground against the broken streets, sending debris flying. A group of scavengers had arrived, searching for anything of value. They had weapons, rough but functional, and their eyes glinted with the kind of hunger Alara knew well, the desire to take. To claim to survive without concern for others? Ilara's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm. There were no guns drawn yet, no immediate threat, but she knew it could come at any moment. Joran stepped slightly in front of her, his posture protective, his gaze unwavering. We need a plan, he said quietly. We can move through the side alley. It's risky, but it will keep the children safe. Lara nodded. Lead the way. The alley was narrow and shadowed, but it was clear of debris. They moved quickly, each step deliberate. The scavengers passed, oblivious to their presence. Alara felt the tension drain slightly from her shoulders, though she remained alert. Her children were safe for now. Once clear, they emerged into an open courtyard, sunlight warming their backs. Alara took a deep breath, letting herself relax for the first time since the vehicle had appeared. Joran watched her carefully, as if measuring her response. You did well, he said quietly. All of you. Alara shook her head, feeling both relief and frustration. We survived. That's all. Surviving isn't enough. I want them to have better than this. Always better. Joran looked at her steadily. Better isn't always about leaving. Sometimes it's about facing the world with courage, teaching them how to survive, how to think, how to rise. You're already giving them that. Alara felt a tightness in her chest, the kind that made words stick in her throat. She wanted to believe him, but doubt was stubborn. Could she truly provide enough? Could she truly give them a life worth living in a world that was constantly trying to break them? They made their way home slowly, carrying their finds from the ruins. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the settlement. Smoke rose from other fires, and the air carried the faint scent of cooking food and dust. At home, she organized the supplies, teaching the children how to use the tools safely. Lyra listened intently, her small hands steady, while Kale helped arrange the items with a seriousness beyond his years. Alara watched them, pride and fear warring inside her. Joren stayed nearby, helping when needed but giving her space to lead. His presence was reassuring, a silent promise that she was not alone in this struggle. As night fell, the settlement quieted. Families huddled in their small homes, sharing meals and stories, keeping each other safe. Alara sat with her children close, feeling the weight of the day but also the warmth of connection. Do you think the convoy will return? Kale asked again, his voice small. Alara smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from his face. Maybe, but we cannot count on them. We have what we have, and that is enough for now. Together, we are strong. Lyra yawned, leaning against her mother. Together is better, she whispered. Alara nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm. She knew the challenges were far from over. Tomorrow would bring new obstacles, new dangers, and new choices. But for tonight, they were safe. For tonight, they were together. And for tonight, That was enough. She glanced at Joran, who watched quietly from a short distance. His presence was steady, unwavering. He had refused to let her break, had reminded her of the strength she carried within herself. And for the first time in a long time, Ilara felt that maybe, just maybe, she did not have to face the world alone. The stars above flickered silently, indifferent, yet eternal. And in that quiet, Ilara found a spark of hope, a reminder that humans were built to endure, to protect, and to rise, even when the world seemed determined to crush them. And so, as she held her children close, she resolved to face the days ahead with courage, knowing that strength, love, and perseverance could carve out a better life even in the ruins of a broken world. The following morning dawned gray and quiet, the remnants of night's cold settling across the settlement. Ilara woke early, as always, her mind restless. The events in the eastern ruins still lingered in her thoughts, the near encounter with scavengers. The fear in her children's eyes, the surge of relief when they emerged unharmed. She could not shake the thought that danger was always just a step away. Lyra and Kale were already awake, whispering excitedly about the discoveries they had made yesterday. Lyra held a small metal gear she had found, polishing it in her hands as if it were treasure. Kale had a stack of tattered notebooks, each one a glimpse into a world that had existed before the collapse. Ilara smiled faintly, brushing her hair back. "Careful with those. They might be fragile. You can use them to learn," Kale said seriously. "You always say knowledge is important," Lara nodded, feeling both pride and a shadow of worry. Knowledge was indeed powerful, but it was only useful if one survived long enough to apply it. That balance, that fragile thread between learning and survival, shaped her life, and now it shaped hers and her children's. Joran arrived soon after, his presence as steady and calm as ever. Today, however, there was an urgency in his movements. He carried tools and supplies, clearly ready for work. "I checked the filters again," he said, setting down his pack. "They're holding, but the water levels are dropping faster than expected. We need to conserve for a few days." Lara nodded, understanding the reality of scarcity all too well. "We'll manage," she said. "We always do." He looked at her quietly, the way he always did when he seemed to measure her resolve. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly. Ilara felt her chest tighten. Strength was a fragile thing in this world. It could be taken away in an instant, and she carried the fear of loss like a shadow. But she also felt a flicker of reassurance. Joran's presence was not commanding, not intrusive, was steady. He refused to let her break, even when she doubted herself. By mid-morning, the children were eager to explore again, but Ilara held them close. "Not today," she said firmly. "Today, we prepare. There are repairs to make and supplies to organize." Kale frowned. "But yesterday was fun. We found so many things." Ilara knelt, looking him in the eyes. "Fun is not enough to keep us safe. You need to understand that sometimes caution is more important than curiosity. Tomorrow, we might explore again, but only when it is safe." Lyra sighed but nodded. She understood the reasoning, though the spark of adventure in her eyes remained. As the day wore on, a distant rumble broke the monotony. It was low at first, like distant thunder, but gradually it grew louder. Ilara froze, listening. She knew the sound. Vehicles were approaching, large, organized, and likely carrying people who could be dangerous or persuasive. Joran noticed her tension. "Convoy," he said quietly. "It's the one you were worried about." Ilara's stomach tightened. She had spent so long debating whether to join them, whether they offered the better life she wanted for her children. Now, they were here. She could see the glint of sunlight on metal from the tops of their vehicles. Hear the muted shouts of people moving with purpose. The convoy stopped at the edge of the settlement, its presence imposing. A few figures disembarked, surveying the area. They were well-equipped, carrying supplies and uniforms that suggested order and structure. They called out greetings, their voices firm but friendly. Ilara's heart wavered. The promise of security, education, and stability for her children was now within reach. The temptation was strong. She looked at Lyra and Kale, their eyes wide with curiosity and cautious excitement. The decision that had haunted her for weeks was no longer theoretical. It demanded an answer. Joran stepped forward, subtly positioning himself between her and the convoy. "You don't have to decide today," he said softly, his voice calm but insistent. "We can handle what comes. You don't have to carry this alone." Alara shook her head, frustration and doubt swirling within her. "It's not about carrying it alone. It's about giving them the life they deserve. Maybe that life isn't here, it might be with them." Joran did not argue. Instead, he gestured toward the children, who were now peering at the convoy with interest. And what if the life they deserve is built where they are? Where they learn to survive, to think, to care for each other. Sometimes better isn't a place, it's a choice, a strength you carry with you. Alara blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. She had thought better meant leaving, escaping, trading the struggle for comfort. But perhaps better could also mean resilience, courage, and connection, things no convoy could hand her. The convoy leader approached, smiling warmly. "We can offer safety and opportunity," he said. "Your children can have education, food, and a future without danger." Elira's hand tightened around hers, and she glanced at her children. Kale's gaze was curious, Lyra's cautious. They did not know the full weight of the world outside, but they trusted her. She felt the pull of responsibility, the desire to give them a life she had dreamed of, and the deep fear that she might fail them either way. She took a step back, shaking her head. I need to think." The leader nodded. "We will be here. The offer stands. But time is limited. We cannot wait forever." As they retreated to the convoy, Alara turned to Joran. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" Joran shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. "I don't, but I know when someone is about to break. I won't let that happen to you. Not now. Not ever." Alara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper she could not name. He was not offering her a life of ease. He was offering her strength, partnership, the reassurance that she was not alone. The rest of the day passed with preparation. Alara and Joran worked together to reinforce the settlement walls, organize supplies, and teach the children small but important lessons about survival. Lyra learned to use the small toolkit from the ruins, while Kale practiced reading the notebooks she had salvaged. Each moment was a reminder that life, even in hardship, carried opportunities to grow. By evening, the sun dipped low, casting shadows across the settlement. The convoy was still there, their presence looming yet distant. Alara sat with her children, listening to their laughter as they shared stories of the day's adventures. She felt a sense of pride in their resilience and creativity. J.O.R.A. joined them quietly, settling beside her. "They're learning," he said. "More than you think. And so are you," Alara nodded. "I hope so. I want them to have a chance at something better. I want them to be safe, happy, and strong." He placed a hand gently on hers. "They will, because you're teaching them what really matters. Not a place, not promises, but courage, love, and perseverance. That is stronger than any convoy or settlement could offer." Alara leaned back, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of clarity. Better was not a place or a promise, was the life she created for her children. Here and now, with strength, ingenuity, and love guiding them. And yet, the convoy's presence remained a reminder of the choices she still had to make. Tomorrow would bring questions she could no longer avoid, decisions that would shape her children's future. But tonight she would rest, surrounded by the warmth of her family and the quiet strength of someone who refused to let her break. Lyra yawned, leaning against her mother. "Together is better," she murmured. Echoing words from the previous night, Alara smiled, brushing her hair back from her daughter's face. "Yes," she said softly. "Together is better." Kale rested his head against her shoulder, his small hand gripping hers. "I feel safe with you," he whispered. Alara's heart swelled. That was all that mattered. Safety, love, and the courage to face whatever came next. The world outside was harsh, unforgiving, and unpredictable, but she had the strength to meet it head-on. And she had Joran, steadfast and unwavering, reminding her that she was never alone. As night settled over the settlement, Ilara allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The stars above were bright and constant, a silent promise that even in darkness, there was light. She knew the days ahead would be difficult, that choices would be painful, and that the convoy's offer would test her resolve. But she also knew this: she would not break. She would face every challenge with courage, protect her children with ingenuity, and build a life worthy of them, even in a world determined to test her at every turn. And as she closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of her children's breathing and the quiet presence of Joran beside her, she felt hope. Hope, not for an easy life, not for comfort, but for a future where strength, love, and humanity could thrive against all odds. Tomorrow, the decision would come. Tomorrow, the challenge would be real. But tonight, she was ready. Tonight, she was strong. Tonight, she would not break. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dust and metal from the ruins beyond the settlement. Ilara rose before dawn, as she always did, feeling the weight of the decision she could no longer avoid. The convoy had remained at the edge of their home, their presence both a promise and a test. She had spent nights thinking, worrying, and imagining the life they could give her children. But every scenario came back to the same question: would that life be truly theirs, or would it be someone else's version of better? Lyra and Kale stirred quietly, rubbing their eyes, their small faces lit by the first streaks of sunlight. Ilara pulled them close, holding them tightly for a moment. "Today's a big day," she said softly, trying to hide the fear that gripped her heart. "We will face it together." Kale looked up at her, his eyes filled with trust. "Together's always better, right?" "Yes," Ilara replied, brushing his hair back. "Always." Joran appeared soon after, as steady and calm as ever. He carried no words of advice, no instructions, only the quiet presence that had become her anchor over the past days. She felt a surge of gratitude and relief. In a world that threatened to break her at every turn, he had refused to let her fall. The convoy leader approached, a friendly but firm expression on his face. "We've waited," he said. "The offer still stands. If you choose to come with us, your children will have education, food, and security. No hardships, no danger." Lara studied him, her mind racing. The offer was tempting to tempting. A life free from struggle, a life where her children could grow without fear. But she looked at Lyra and Kale, who were watching the convoy with curiosity but no real understanding of the cost. They did not know that safety could sometimes come at the price of freedom, that comfort could stifle courage. Joran stood beside her, silent but unwavering. His presence reminded her of the strength they had already built together, the lessons, the survival, the resilience. He had shown her that better could be created, not given. Ilara took a deep breath. "I've thought about this," she began, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I know what you're offering. It's safe. It's easy. It's tempting." She looked at her children, their bright eyes fixed on her. "But I've realized something important. Better isn't a place someone gives you. Better is what we create together, with courage, with love, and with perseverance." The convoy leader frowned slightly. "You're choosing to stay? With all the dangers here?" Ilara nodded. "Yes, I am. Because my children deserve more than comfort. They deserve strength. They deserve a life where they learn to survive, to think, to care for each other. A life where they know that even in the harshest world, humans can endure, adapt, and thrive." The leader's expression hardened, but he did not push further. He could not understand what she had seen in the ruins, what she had built here with her own hands and ingenuity. He could not see the courage she had nurtured in her children, or the quiet heroism in Joran's steadfast presence. The convoy left soon after, their engines rumbling as they moved back toward the distant horizon. Ilara watched them go, feeling both relief and pride. She had made the choice, not the easy one, but the right one for her family. As the day unfolded, the settlement buzzed with activity. Ilara and Joran worked side by side to reinforce walls, repair water filters, and organize supplies. Lyra and Kale moved confidently among the adults, carrying tools, stacking containers, and helping with tasks. Every action was a lesson in resilience, in ingenuity, and in the quiet strength of humanity. By midday, the repairs were complete, and the settlement was stronger than it had been in weeks. Ilara stood at the top of the main wall, looking out at the surrounding ruins. The wind stirred the dust and carried the distant sound of wildlife returning to areas long abandoned. She felt a strange sense of triumph. They were not just surviving, they were reclaiming their world. Jore approached, carrying a small package of tools. "You did well," he said simply. "You led them. You kept them safe. You made the right choice." Ilara shook her head, smiling faintly. "I didn't do it alone. I had help." He nodded, his eyes steady and unwavering. "You had courage. And sometimes, courage is the strongest tool we have." As evening fell, Ilara gathered her children near the fire. The orange glow illuminated their faces, highlighting the determination and curiosity that shone in their eyes. Lyra leaned against her mother, her small hand holding Ilara's, while Kale sat close, his eyes alert and thoughtful. "Today was a good day," Ilara said softly. "We worked hard, learned new things, and kept our home safe. That is what matters." Lyra yawned but smiled. "I like learning with you, Mother." Kale nodded. "And I like being with Joran. He helps us, and he never gives up." Ilara felt a warmth in her chest. It was not just relief, it was pride, love, and a deep understanding that the life they were building together was already better than any promise the convoy could offer. They were learning to survive, to create, and to thrive on their own terms. As the night deepened, the settlement quieted. Fires burned in small hearths, and the faint hum of conversation echoed through the walls. Ilara sat outside, gazing at the stars above. The sky was clear, the constellations bright and constant, a silent reminder that even in a world that had changed so drastically, some things remained eternal. Jaren joined her quietly, settling beside her. Neither spoke at first, allowing the silence to carry the weight of the day. Finally, Ilara spoke. "I was afraid," she admitted softly. "Afraid that I couldn't give them enough, that I wasn't strong enough. Afraid that I would fail them." Joran placed a hand over hers. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone. You never have to face it alone." Lara smiled, feeling a rare peace. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She had faced the choice, made it with courage, and embraced the path that would teach her children what truly mattered. The next morning, she woke to the sound of laughter. Lyra and Kale were playing near the edge of the settlement, using small scraps of wood and metal to build tiny towers. Their energy and creativity filled the air with hope. Ilara watched, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. These moments, simple, small, and fleeting, were what made life worth living. Joran appeared again, carrying supplies from a nearby cache. He watched the children with a faint smile. "They're learning fast," he said. Ilara nodded. "Yes, and they're learning from you too." He shrugged slightly, but there was warmth in his expression. "We're teaching each other. That's what humans do. That's what makes us strong." Ilara looked around the settlement, at the walls they had reinforced, the water they had purified, the tools and knowledge they had salvaged. Every effort was a step toward a future they would create together, a future that was not given, but built. Over the following weeks, life in the settlement continued with steady purpose. Ilara taught the children lessons in survival and ingenuity, while Joran helped implement small innovations that made daily life easier. They built stronger walls, repaired old solar panels, and discovered hidden caches of supplies left behind by previous inhabitants. Every day was a challenge, but every day was also a victory. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of red and gold, Ilara sat with her children and Joran near the fire. Lyra rested her head on her mother's shoulder, while Kale leaned against Joran. Both of them tired, but content. Eler felt a deep sense of gratitude. They were safe, they were learning, and they were together. She thought of the convoy, of the tempting promises of comfort and ease. But she knew now that better was not found in someone else's planet, was created with courage, love, and the determination to rise above hardship. Joren looked at her quietly. "You did well," he said simply. "You chose strength, and you chose them." Lara smiled, her heart swelling. "No," she said softly, "we did it together." The children smiled in unison, and for a moment the world felt whole. The ruins beyond the settlement were still dangerous, and the challenges of tomorrow loomed, but within the walls they had fortified, a small light burned, a light of hope, resilience, and human spirit. Ilara looked at Lyra and Kale. At the determination in their eyes and the laughter on their lips, she realized that the life they were building together, with courage, ingenuity, and love, was already better than anything the convoy could offer. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. And in that moment, Ilara understood the truth she had been searching for all along. Better was not something given, and better was not something found. Better was something they created together. She watched the stars appear, one by one, as the night wrapped around the settlement. Joren stood silently nearby, ready to support and protect. Her children slept peacefully, dreaming of the future they would shape. Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the quiet strength of the world around her, and knew with certainty that she had made the right choice. She had refused to break, refused to surrender to fear, and embraced the path that would teach her children the most important lesson of all, that humans, through courage, love, and determination, could create a life worth living even in the harshest of worlds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she was strong. Tonight they were together. Tonight she knew they would thrive. The morning air was sharp and clear, carrying a sense of renewal. Ilara rose before her children, as she always did, taking a quiet moment to look over the settlement. The walls they had rebuilt stood firm, the water filters ran steadily, and the small gardens had begun to yield new growth. Life here was still fragile, still harsh, but it was theirs, built by their own hands. Sustained by human ingenuity and determination, she went to check on Lyra and Kale, who were already awake and whispering excitedly about exploring the ruins safely under her watch. Today, she decided, would be different. They would venture farther than before, but not recklessly. Today she would teach them more than survival. She would teach them leadership, foresight, and courage. Joren arrived quietly as usual, carrying a small satchel filled with tools and supplies. He did not speak at first, allowing Ilara to take the lead. But his presence alone was reassuring. He'd become more than a helper. He'd become a pillar, refusing to let her break and encouraging her to embrace her own strength. "We'll need to reinforce the eastern wall before we go," Joren said finally, his voice calm. "Some sections are weak from the last storm." Ilara nodded. "Good, let's do that first. The children will help, but only under our supervision." As they worked, Lyra and Kale listened intently, mimicking their movements and learning the proper techniques. They lifted small stones, hammered makeshift supports, and learned to balance carefully on uneven surfaces. Ilara felt a deep sense of pride her children were learning to survive, but also to thrive, to think, and to act with purpose. By midday, the eastern wall was secure, and Ilara knew they were ready for their next journey. She gathered the children close and looked at Joren. "We will go further into the ruins today," she said. "We will find new supplies, yes, but also new lessons. They must understand the world as it is, so they can shape it as they want it to be." Joren nodded, adjusting the satchel on his shoulder. "Lead the way." The path through the ruins was treacherous but familiar. Lara moved with care, her eyes scanning for loose debris, unstable structures, and hidden dangers. The children followed closely, imitating her every step. Kale carried a small notebook to record anything he found useful, while Lyra clutched a piece of metal they might need for repairs. Hours passed as they navigated through crumbling streets, abandoned buildings, and narrow alleys. They found small treasures, a broken but repairable solar panel, clean water containers, and a stash of dried food tucked in a hidden corner. Each discovery was a lesson, teaching resourcefulness, patience, and critical thinking. At one point, Lyra stumbled near a collapsed wall, her hand slipping on loose concrete. Ilara reacted instantly, catching her daughter before she could fall. Kale reached out, steadying them both with a small but determined grip. "You have to watch your footing," Ilara said gently. "The world is unforgiving, but we adapt. We survive because we learn." The children nodded, their eyes serious but eager. Each moment in the ruins was shaping them, building the skills they would need to thrive in a world that could be both cruel and beautiful. As the sun began to dip low, they reached the heart of the ruins, a wide open courtyard, surrounded by the skeletal remains of buildings. Here, the signs of human ingenuity were everywhere: old solar panels, partially intact machinery, and remnants of past lives. Ilara and Joran began to assess the area for anything valuable they could salvage, teaching the children how to evaluate usefulness and safety simultaneously. Kale discovered a small intact generator hidden behind a wall. "Look, Mother, this could power part of the settlement." Ilara examined it carefully, nodding. "Yes, it could. But we must transport it carefully. If we break it, it will be useless." Lyra found a stack of tattered maps and diagrams, showing old layouts of the city and possible supply caches. "Maybe we can use these to plan future trips," she said excitedly. Ilara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Her children were not just learning to survive, they were learning to think, to plan, and to shape their environment. This was the life she had hoped to give them, not through comfort or ease, but through resilience, intelligence, and courage. Suddenly a sound broke the quiet, a low rumble, not quite mechanical, but deliberate. Lara froze, motioning for the children to stay close. Joran scanned the ruins, his hand resting on a makeshift tool like it could serve as protection. A small group of scavengers appeared at the far edge of the courtyard, armed with crude tools but clearly looking for supplies. Lara's heart raced. This was a real test, one she had feared for weeks. But now she felt ready, not reckless, not alone. "Stay close," she whispered to the children. "Watch and learn." She stepped forward, her posture calm but commanding. Joran moved to her side, offering silent support. Together, they assessed the situation, noting the scavengers' numbers, the terrain, and the safest path back to the settlement. Ilara made a quick decision. "We'll use the collapsed buildings as cover and move quietly to the side exit," she said. "Do exactly as I do." The children nodded, mimicking her movements, and they began their careful retreat. Every step was deliberate, every motion calculated. The scavengers did not notice, and by the time they reached a safer area, they were all unharmed. Lyra whispered, "That was scary, Mother." Ilara smiled gently. "Yes, but you learned something important. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it. And now you know how to think and move safely in danger." Kale nodded solemnly, clutching his notebook tightly. "I understand. We can survive anything if we think and work together." Joran placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder. "And you're teaching them well? Better than I could have hoped." The journey back was quiet but purposeful. Each member of the group carried their treasures and lessons, moving as a unit. By the time they returned to the settlement, the sun was low on the horizon, painting the walls and streets in warm golden red. That night, after a meal of shared rations and laughter, Ilara sat with her children and Joran near the fire. The air was still, filled with the soft sounds of settling humans and distant wildlife. She looked at her children, their faces bright with accomplishment and curiosity. "Today, you learned more than how to survive," she said softly. "You learned how to think, how to act, how to protect yourselves and each other. That is what makes humans strong." Lyra leaned against her, smiling. "I feel like I can do anything now." Kale nodded in agreement. "We can build, we can survive, and we can help others. Just like you taught us." Ilara felt a warmth in her chest that went beyond pride. Was the realization that she had created a foundation stronger than any promised life the convoy could offer. Safety, comfort, and ease were fleeting, but courage, ingenuity, and resilience were eternal. Joran watched quietly, his calm presence grounding her. "You've done well," he said simply. "You've chosen strength, love, and humanity over ease and comfort. That is what will carry them forward." The stars appeared overhead, bright and clear in the night sky. The settlement, once fragile and vulnerable, now stood resilient, illuminated by the fire and the quiet strength of those within it. Ilara knew the road ahead would still be full of challenges, storms, scarcity, and potential threats, but she also knew that they were ready. Together, they had built a life worth living. Together, they had learned what it meant to be human, to endure, to create, and to rise above adversity. As she watched Lyra and Kale drift to sleep, leaning against each other and feeling safe in the home they had built, Ilara felt a profound sense of peace. She had thought they needed someone else to provide a better life, but now she understood that better was created through courage, ingenuity, and love. It was nurtured by teaching, guiding, and standing firm, even when the world seemed determined to break them. Joran stood nearby, silent but steady, a reminder that human connections, loyalty, and compassion were as essential as food or shelter. They had built something stronger than walls. They had built resilience, hope, and the knowledge that humans could thrive against any odds. Ilara smiled faintly, brushing her hair back. She whispered to herself, "We did it. We're creating something better, together." And in that moment, the settlement was alive, not just with the physical presence of walls and tools, but with the spirit of humanity itself. Resilient, clever, courageous, and unwavering. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, yes, but Ilara knew they were ready. She had faced fear, temptation, and doubt, and emerged stronger. Her children had learned from her example, and Joran had reminded her that support, loyalty, courage could create a life worth living. For the first time in a long time, she felt certain of one thing: humanity could endure, rise, and build something extraordinary, even in the harshest of worlds. And she, alongside her children and those who stood with her, would continue to do so. The night stretched on, quiet and eternal, and Ilara closed her eyes. The stars above reflected the firelight in the settlement, a mirror of human resilience shining across a fractured world. They had survived, they had learned, and they had thrived. And that, she knew, was the true meaning of better. Please subscribe.